that kind of collaborative approach that we have both internally within our org, but with our clients, kind of gives us, much stronger than the sum of the parts, really. It's been exciting to see how we're evolving that model.
Hi, you're listening to The Secure Developer. It's part of the MyDevSecOps community, a platform for developers, operators, and security people to share their views and practices on DevSecOps, Dev and Sec collaboration, cloud security, and more. Check out mydevsecops.io to join the community and find other great resources. This podcast is sponsored by Snyk. Snyk is a dev-first security company helping companies fix vulnerabilities in open source components and containers without slowing down development. To learn more, visit snyk.io. On today's episode, Guy Podjarny, president and co-founder of Snyk, talks to Neil Drennan. As the Chief Technical Officer of 10x Future Technologies, Neil leads the design and delivery of 10x Cloud's native platform. Neil has a deep expertise in delivering great customer experience through cloud-based distributed computing systems on a global scale. He joined 10x in 2018 from Amazon, where he worked on their video software and AWS projects. He has also held senior technology and engineering positions at BBC Worldwide, Virgin Media, ITV, Sky, and Deloitte.
Hello everyone, welcome back to The Secure Developer. Today we're going into kind of the future of the banking technology over here with Neil Drennan, who is the CTO at 10x Future Technologies, dealing with banking. Neil, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Guy.
So Neil, we're going to dig a lot into this sort of intersection of, modern banking and security and, how do you sort of, gel the two together well and work. But before we dig into that, tell us a little bit about yourself and, what you do. We'll dig into 10x in a bit, but also what was your journey kind of getting into this spot?
Okay, great. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer at 10x. I joined 10x in March 2018. Prior to that, I ran the largest scale services at Amazon Video globally and also worked with a number of AWS teams. So really, I kind of looked at large scale distributed computing challenges for the end consumer and trying to make sure that our systems were secure, performant, and gave a very good experience to our end users. And so I looked at everything really from kind of architecture, design, delivery, all the way through to running those live services at pretty large volume. Prior to that, I held sort of a number of VP engineering roles across different areas of the UK media sector. So I was VP of engineering at BBC Worldwide for a while. I also led TV engineering at Virgin Media. So did a lot of stuff around Ultra HD and bringing live simulcast services into Virgin.
Sort of dealing with a little bit of small-scale projects over there in the
it was interesting.
across the industry.
Actually, it's interesting because I feel that banking is kind of at this intersection where media and entertainment was about 10 years ago, which is at that point, online video was just about growing, and many broadcasters were thinking, how are we going to deal with this potentially hugely disruptive change in behaviors? And I feel that the financial services sector is in a similar way, right? It's got a really set of old legacy technologies that banks have been running on for decades. And, some banks have moved and gone digital by building, API management layers and building mobile apps, but they've not really addressed the legacy problem of the core of the bank. And so bringing kind of the new technologies that we have available to us now from a cloud perspective into the sector, I think it's a great opportunity to address the end user performance, to address the cost base of banks, and to improve the agility of the solutions that they're taking out to consumers. So it really is, although they're completely different industries in many different ways, the challenges I think are quite similar and as exciting. And I genuinely feel that financial services is going to go through a similar journey to media and entertainment has gone, and there's going to be some big winners in that world, and there's going to be some big losers as well.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess the challenges, if in media was a little bit more, towards sort of scale and delivery of quality over the web, a lot of it over here is about security. It is about how do you sort of modernize while sort of staying safe, sort of keeping my data safe on it.
100%. And yeah, absolutely. And I think if you kind of look at consumers' needs of a banking platform, what's their first order concern? It's that my money's safe, and that the people that are looking after my money are doing a really good job. And in the world that we live in today, where there's kind of the security vectors that attack patterns that are kind of coming in are continually evolving, you have to take a very different approach in terms of your security posture and the way in which you embed security within the organization to deliver the outcomes that consumers demand, right? Yep. And we all know kind of the issues of what happens if you don't do so well in that space. It has a dramatic outcome for the organization that fails in this regard.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess let's just for context on that, because we'll talk about how you build it. Tell us a little bit about, 10x. What is it? What is your offering? What is it that you're building?
Sure. So we're building the first cloud-native banking platform that can be used by large-scale banks, small banks, to be able to run their services in the cloud, specifically on AWS to start with, but longer-term other cloud platforms. This enables banks to address their legacy challenge around their cost base. So most banks, if they're running a core banking solution, typically would have been built in the 1970s, 1980s. A plethora of different systems, kind of museum of old technology, really, is kind of our founder, Anthony Jenkins, would call it. And I think that we are very much sort of bringing the new technology that is available from a cloud native perspective into this domain. We're enabling banks to take our service and run their full bank on it. So we build everything from kind of a mobile application all the way down to data stream processing out for analytics purposes, the whole bank effectively in the cloud. Now, some of our clients take our mobile application, others build on top of a set of SDKs that we build, others integrate directly into our API management layer. But essentially, it's the whole piece. Thought from scratch, designed from first principles, architected in a way that enables domain-driven design and scalability of the platform with security from the onset. And that's really been kind of the really exciting challenge that sort of, why did I leave Amazon? It was kind of like, this is the scale of challenge that you kind of dream about once in a generation. And I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to do this.
Oh, that definitely sounds like sort of a massive sort of undertaking to kind of overhaul how that sort of infrastructure of banking is done. Let's talk org a sec. So you're the CTO, you run, a good portion of it. Where does the security activity sit? How much of it is your group? How much is there a separate security organization? How does security responsibility kind of get enacted?
So I think security is everyone's responsibility. And certainly if I answer the question in terms of org structure, then within technology, I have circa 40 odd teams that are building out the different microservices and components that are required to run the bank. When we're building those services, we have a common tools team called Builder Tools that builds out the capabilities to enable those 40 odd development teams to be efficient. So we have a team on platform engineering, we have a team on infrastructure and release engineering. We have a team that sits against developer experience to make the developer, more effective in their role, and then a support team because we support a range of environments across our clients. And that sits alongside independent security function. So if you can think of the independent security function as the checks and balances on everything that we're doing, a quality gate to ensure that we have separation of concerns and that we meet regulatory obligations to our clients. But really, I see it as security cuts across everything within the life cycle. And I use the language security by design, and that trying to emphasize that within our development community. So whenever we're architecting or designing a solution, we're very cognizant of how we're doing that in a secure manner. And then we have the kind of process elements that ensure that security at each stage of the life cycle. So we use a range of leading security tool sets, including SNCC, within our pipeline that are blocking to stop developers and basically putting unsecure code into the code base. We have a set of tool sets that are continually scanning our environments, that are alerting to our own SIEM. We also have a very sort of close relationship with some very large scale organizations who have their own SIEMs that we provide them with the data to be able to correlate with what else they're seeing else in the world. And so I think that kind of collaborative approach that we have both internally within our org, but with our clients kind of gives us, much stronger than the sum of the parts, really. And it's been exciting to see how we're evolving that model because I genuinely, I haven't seen that elsewhere. And, we're sort of working that through and it's extremely exciting to see the benefits that that's giving us.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to dig into that kind of collaboration with the security teams. But before we veer off kind of, I guess, outside within the team. So like as you introduce something like vulnerability scanning, how does that external security team engage versus, say one of these kind of platform teams or sort of tool building teams? Would you say it's primarily those kind of internal teams that are doing developer experience and infrastructure and such that are leading it? Does the mandate come from security? How does that work?
So it's a combination of both. So the security will have a posture on what our security stance needs to be in certain areas and give us a very clear sort of set of requirements and mandate that we need to look at. But then we're constantly evolving the architecture and the design. So we'll regularly sit with them and say, we've got a design for this new component or new area. This is how we're planning to do it. What do you think to that? And so we have kind of at all levels, really. When we're using tool sets and we're alerting off, any vulnerabilities that are found, then that's transparent and open to everybody. So anyone in the team can go and see what the current state of vulnerabilities across the entire org. And we have a vulnerability dashboard, in fact, that pulls the data from all these different sources and then makes it really super clear. And we review this in our daily stand-up across all teams. So it's not just a functional delivery piece, it's functional, non-functional, and security.
Yep.
That everybody all comes together every morning. And, that means that there's this very dynamic sort of environment where, we identify a problem, we can jump on it and we can fix it really, really quickly. And that's been quite exciting because I think in a lot of organizations I've seen before, you kind of have the separate silo that is the security function over on the side somewhere, and they find it really hard to engage in with the development community. We've really tried to sort of break down those barriers and get a close working relationship across the teams.
Yeah.
But important that you do have that separate checks and balances, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like it's almost like a kind of a customer provider type element, right? It sounds like security is kind of, understanding the security posture and setting the requirements for saying, well, you need to tackle this, vulnerabilities problem, for instance, kind of, known vulnerabilities, but a lot of the implementation and definitely sort of the daily operation is done, right alongside in those sort of stand-ups and sort of by the same teams that are building, tackling quality problems or sort of functional additions. Is that the right way to think about it?
That's exactly it. And I think it's good because you've got that single view across the whole platform and you can make the relative prioritization decisions as a collective group. We've got a common problem, we're going to address it in this way.
Yep.
And so I think that really helps the teams become more effective, and having that open communication channel across those teams is super, super important, especially at the rate that, vulnerabilities are coming up today.
Yep.
You can't be effective without that openness and transparency of the data that's coming out from all these great tools.
Yeah, fully agreed. And it sounds, indeed truly scalable. Let's talk skills a little bit. So for that to work, did you need to adapt anything about, the type of people you bring onto the team?
I often think most problems with an organization start with people. My HR director is going to get upset with me for saying this, but I think you start with the right people and then the process and the technology follow. And I think that when looking at this challenge, I went out to find someone from a threat modeling perspective. Just an example, his last job was sort of 5 years at GCHQ. Mm-hmm. And doing that type of activity across a number of, government intelligence agencies that you can never tell me about. But that's the type of person that I think, we've sought out to work within our organization, because the type of threats that I think we face are the internal threat, the external threat, and, the scale of clients that we work with and planning to work with are, state level actors. And so there is sort of this existential threat on our company if we don't get this right, and the threats are various and always there. And so you need to sort of scale your organization with the type of people that can help protect you against those risks.
Yeah. Interesting. So their security organization exists there off to the side, but you are hiring specific security talent into the sort of the CTO org, into the technology organization, because you do need that more embedded in as well.
Exactly. We have it across both. And I think that helps then with a really great sort of level playing field in the conversation between the security team and engineering functions. And seeing that collaboration across the two evolve has been really great. So look forward to seeing that happen more.
So let's maybe go down a level. You talked about security by design and, building things from first principles. What are some examples of that, whether it's on the tooling side or on the architecture of some, tools you've built in or sort of, decisions you've made that you think are, manifestations of that?
So I think the classic thing is if you kind of look at the world today, if you're a bank, you're running a whole range of legacy platforms. Like some are up in the region of 4,000 plus applications on heterogeneous architecture that's running usually inactive passive data centers separated by a minimum of 30 kilometers. And the classic, we've built the tin, we've put the network in, we're running servers, and it's all big and runs into the order of, if you're a tier one bank, billions of dollars a year to run your technology and operations services, and takes a long time to build out new capability. If you want to build a new data center, you're looking at billions of pounds worth of cost and several years of doing it. Whereas now, obviously, within the cloud, we can spin up entire environments in no time. And we actually spun up an environment in Sydney a few weeks ago and put a whole bank into Sydney in less than 5 days. And the rate determining step was some of the third parties we were using, not our ability to run a Terraform through on AWS. Actually, it's AWS's API was the rate limiting factor on us, and we're kind of talking to AWS about relaxing that a little bit.
So when you deal with scale.
So the speed at which you can do this now is transformational compared to the legacy approach. And I think, in coupled with that, from a security perspective, those data centers, the security posture and the way in which banks have thought about security in the past has been very much sort of the old moat problem. We'll secure the edge and then everything else. As long as no one gets in around the edge, then okay, we're all right underneath it. Whereas the tooling that we've got available to us in the cloud native world is completely different. We can continually scan everything that we're doing on all of our environments against, if I take Dome 9 as an example, we can look at our conformance against NIST, we can look at our conformance against ISO 27001 constantly, all the time, across all of our environments. And the minute anything kind of comes up, we've got auto mediation rules that can kick in and help resolve that problem before it becomes a publicly known issue. And that's just completely different from the way that things have used to be done. So I think the first thing is that the technology that is available now is transformational in the things that you can do. Your observability on the platform is completely different from where it was. So knowing kind of the unknown becomes far easier in the cloud world than it does on a legacy architecture. And then from a process and delivery perspective, when we're designing and delivering code, when we've got our release pipeline, we are running scans with SNCC on open source vulnerabilities across 40 teams on every piece of code that gets put into the pipeline. And in fact, we've been doing that in a so it's an automated way in which the process is run, and it highlights the vulnerabilities. Next week, we're actually blocking it into the dev pipeline, so code won't be able to be pushed into our sort of lowest level environment if it doesn't tick the box.
It's a brave moment.
And so there's we're already excited about that next week. It's a big week for us doing that, but we've been running kind of in this mode where we've been actively monitoring each day the results and then dealing with it, but it's going to be blocking from next week. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, very cool. And definitely it sounds like the evolution of sort of building the practices to have these tools built in. They're built into the stand-ups, they're built into the pipeline, the continuous monitoring aspect of it, and just sort of built into the way that you develop software, which I think is really good. I always love to sort of, think about the sort of the concrete tips that people can adopt. And it sounds like very much the sort of embedding of the vulnerability dashboards as part of the, not just the pipeline, but also the stand-up review, sounds like a great practice to have, as well as the sort of the comment about hiring, it can't all be GCHQ, but, but some, and, for our sort of, US friends, that's sort of the intelligence body here in the UK, but, somebody with security background to actually, sort of help drive those activities inside the technology organizations. So, that sounds really, really quite powerful.
Yeah, we've adopted the STRIDE framework, so as well in terms of application threat modeling. And I think that in terms of another concrete tip, we found that to be really useful. Getting teams sitting down with their pack of cards and then playing out different security vulnerability scenarios is a really engaging way to get the teams excited about security and thinking about the right things on a continuous basis. And I'd really recommend doing that.
So before we kind of opened up this element of working with customers, and these are sort of big banks, that have very significant compliance requirements, right? And compliance doesn't have the best reputation of being the most nimble and agile in its own right. And you need to kind of, on one hand, drive, agility and drive speed. And on the other side, still introduce, remain compliant and sort of fit those needs. What's been your experience? How do you try to sort of, serve those two masters, if you will, right? And be compliant while keeping up the pace?
So I think a lot of it comes about tooling and being able to provide evidence that you're executing the practices that you talk about. And so embedding that tooling, embedding the processes in place gives you, there's a lot of benefits in doing that. Firstly, you get conformance in terms of the way that teams operate. Mm-hmm. And so second, it becomes easy to evidence because it's just naturally part of the process that you're doing every day. And so that builds a lot of confidence in compliance teams and risk management teams is my experience. And thirdly, I think that a lot of the tools and techniques that we're using here are fundamentally more advanced than legacy approaches. And so by the mere implication that we're doing these types of things, oftentimes compliance and risk management organizations are like, well, we didn't do that today. And so this is great. Oh, how do we embed this in the rest of the organization? Because, what we're saying here we really like. And it's actually it was one of the areas I was probably most concerned about kind of coming into financial services as an industry. But it's one that I've actually enjoyed the most, perversely, because some of the teams that we've worked with our clients are so on the ball with what's happening within the marketplace and what threats we're exposed to, that they've been able to work with us really closely in terms of on the design elements as well as the compliance side of things. That's helped drive up our maturity as an organization really, really quickly. And so, when you think if you're working with large scale banks around the world, they've been exposed to these threats day in, day out for years.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of great learning that can be applied from that. Although the method in which you protect yourself nowadays is different, the type of attack patterns are, the same.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And you talked about collaborating with them by actually sort of plugging and pushing data into their systems for them to analyze?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah. This is the novel approach. So obviously we get logs off everything in terms of what we're observing from the tool sets that we're using across all our environments. Those are real-time streamed. And so we can real-time stream those into our clients' SIEMs. And what that enables them to do is to be able to aggregate all of that data and information across the 10x platform for their environments with everything else that they're seeing out in the world. And so with that then superset of data, they can, anomaly detection becomes, better as a result.
Yeah.
They've got known threat vectors that are coming in that they've known about for a while that they can then look for within the data set that we have. So that's one of the things, the capabilities that we built out a while ago, and we've seen it used to great effect. That doesn't mean that we take any less of a relaxed posture. We have our own SIEM.
Yeah.
But when you couple that SIEM with client SIEMs as well, then it becomes a much more powerful proposition in totality.
Yeah, no, I think the model is really interesting, and you almost wonder whether, as soon as you're a part of the operation, even if you're a third-party service that's not quite at the core as you are, whether these types of models of feeding this information into the customers, in this case the banks, sort of SIEM surrounding, is something that would kind of grow in demand. Because as you point out, you're separating out the understanding of the threat from the ability or the methodology through which you protect against it. But as more security controls go into the development surrounding, that surrounding knows how to build software, knows how to build it resilient, but don't necessarily understand security as deeply. That collaboration with the security side and feeding them information so they can be data-driven might be something you can kind of envision how banks might demand that of more of their vendors or sort of services overall.
I really hope so, and there's no reason why it can't be done. And I think we've sort of proven that it can be, and I hope others kind of follow that direction, because I think if we can improve the security landscape in this area by providing more data, more real time to enable better decisions across the organization, then I'm all for it.
Have the banks been have they been receiving that well? Like, have they been positive in their outlook? Do they have to kind of scratch their heads? Is like, what do you mean you're going to send me data? Or
no,
was that demanded
it's
from
very
them?
much been a collaborative approach, right? They see this as an opportunity for us to work really closely together. And so it's been across both sides, a sort of willingness to try out this new thing. And if it works, as we've seen it has done, then great. And we'll keep on building and iterating and improving it over time. And, that's I see it now as, when we were talking about it probably 18 months ago, we were sort of going, this is new. We've not done this. It feels slightly uncomfortable. Is it going to be okay? And now looking back now, it's just the standard, and we've set the bar at another level. And I look forward to every time, pushing that higher and higher.
Yeah, and that comes from sort of, as you pointed out, sort of thinking from first principles about what's the right way to do it. So this has been great, Neil, and a lot of great insights and sort of, tips, and definitely sort of an impressive setup. I like to ask every guest coming on the show, if you have one tip, one bit of advice, or maybe a pet peeve, that you have that people are doing they should stop about security that you can kind of give a team looking to level up their security foo, what would that be?
So I would say it's security by design. And I think if you start carefully thinking about how you can embed security across your entire organization and the processes the way in which you train your developers and the tooling that you enable them to use to be able to identify and fix problems ahead of them being an issue. I think that's the thought I would leave people with.
Yeah, well, that's definitely sort of excellent advice. Well, Neil, this was a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Right, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
And thanks everybody for tuning in, and I hope you join us for the next one.
Thanks for listening to The Secure Developer. That's all we have time for today. For additional episodes and full transcriptions, visit mydevsecops.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or get involved with the community, you can also find us on Twitter at mydevsecops. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes if you enjoyed today's episode. Bye for now.